Welcome to this Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame Legacy Project video. I want to introduce you today to my good friend, Suzanne Winter. Susie, welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
I'm really looking forward to this. Of course, we've known each other for
Ever,
decades. Yeah,
forever.
but I'm sure I'm going to come out of this, knowing some things that I didn't know before. Starting with, take us all the way back to the beginning. How did you get into music to start with?
Well, I went to undergraduate school at Troy. And when I was in high school, I got into a little archaeology club and I loved it. So I went to Troy planning on majoring in archaeology. They didn't have it. So
Wow.
I said, I know. And so I said, well, I love music. So I guess I'll major in music.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. Well, even before that, it was elementary when you started playing the flute. Take us through how all that began?
Well, here's another one. When I joined band, I wanted to play the clarinet. My sister had tried band and had a clarinet, and my mom said, we're not buying another instrument. You're going to play the flute. Well, my sister had a
Whoa.
clarinet. And so I was supposed to, wrong. I wanted to play clarinet. She had a flute, and mom said, you're going to have to play the flute. I said, okay. And I ended up being pretty good, and I loved it. And I loved it because I did all the solo and ensemble stuff, and I loved Renaissance
Uh-huh.
music and all of this other stuff. And even though my first band director was not a very good teacher, he presented us with the old standards like Egmont and things like that, which in
Yes.
William Tell, we never played it well, but it was so much fun.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, it worked out pretty well that the flute was the thing that was laying
Yeah,
around
it
the
is.
house, and that mom
Yep.
said, "Look, you're going to do
Yep.
this."
Yep.
And so, was this you're originally from Selma? Is that
Hmm.
okay? Both you and Ski.
Yep. And within before I graduated, we got an incredible band director, Rush Gavin,
Oh yes,
and
yeah,
he really encouraged my musicianship. He was a great teacher and a firm disciplinarian.
oh yes, oh yes,
You know
and
Rush.
absolutely very well. And so
Hmm.
that was an outstanding band program. So
Yeah, it was when he
you went to
came.
Troy well prepared. And so I guess you had planned to be in the marching band and so
At
forth,
Troy, yeah,
major in
I got a
archaeology, and then
scholarship to Troy. I was in marching band and the symphonic band and the reading band and all of those things. So yeah.
yeah. And then and then what was it that switched us from archaeology to music? That was kind of a
Well, I really had no knowledge of archaeology except for the little club I belonged to, and we went on digs, and I thought that was exciting. And music, I had always done, and so I
yeah.
really loved it, and said, "Well, I think maybe I can do something in music," and
Mhm.
so I did that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. And uh and and so it was then I want to be a band director.
Well, see, he's getting well. I wanted to be an English teacher.
Okay.
I had a major in music and English, and I never thought that I could be a band director. I just didn't think that was
Wow.
something I
Uh-huh.
was capable of doing. And so didn't get an English job, but I did get elementary music. And my respect goes out to them so much because Frank,
Mhm.
I hated it. I hated teaching
That's
elementary
that's a
music.
tough job.
It is a really tough
You
job.
got the whole school. You've got
Yeah.
the whole
And it
school.
was on an army base where I taught.
Gosh, yeah. So I guess that was Daleville.
Yep. And what changed me to band was when Ski got the job at Huffman in Birmingham, we moved
Mhm.
and I didn't have a job. And so I did substitute teaching. And a band director in the Birmingham system just kind of disappeared from his job. And so they asked me if I would sub. And I said, oh,
Oh,
okay. And I thought, I don't know what I'm doing in band. So, but I can. It was an inner
yeah.
city school.
Hmm.
So there was not a whole lot I had to do at that time. But I subbed there, and the principal was very supportive, and it was around voting time. And he said, Miss Winter, we want to get our kids marching. I went, okay. We want them to march through the neighborhood and play a song and say, come out and vote, come out and vote. I went, okay. So that was my first introduction to being in charge of a band.
Wow. And so was that at Smith
No,
or no? So
no,
so the subbing was at another. Hmm,
that was at Riley Middle School. I taught
okay.
at Inglenook, Riley, and Powderly.
Okay.
Those are some super inner city schools.
Yeah, yeah. And to kind of back up and fill in some gaps for those who are listening, of course, uh, you and Ski married.
Yep.
Ski was the band director at Daleville. Really developed a fine program there.
Yes, he did.
Um, and there was a little trumpet player in the band that maybe some of our listeners have heard
Yes,
of
that little trumpet
before.
player had perfect pitch. And he was in, I believe he was in the sixth grade or seventh grade when we moved there. And he said, I've got perfect pitch. And Ski said, oh, right. Okay, what is this note? And he hit it on the piano. And Robert W. Smith said, that's a C. And he went, what's this one? So, yes, Robert was in the Daleville band. And we had
Yes.
the pleasure and privilege of working with that child prodigy.
Mhm. Amazing, amazing. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that I did not know was during the Daleville days, what your role was. I know Ski was as the band director, and then so you were teaching the elementary music in the same system?
I taught at Fort Rucker. I taught there
Uh-huh.
before Ski got the Daleville job. He
Okay.
was still in, he went the National Guard, so he lost a year. And so he was still at Troy. He graduated from Troy and got the Daleville job. And I think I taught one more year at Fort Rucker, and then I went to Daleville to apply for an English job. They didn't have it.
Yeah.
But the principal said, are you ready for this one? "Oh, I see that you've had a lot of French." I said, yes. He said, well, we
Oh,
need a French
no.
teacher. And I went, he said, what does this mean? And he held up the year two French book. And I said, that means our world. He said, all right, you got the job. And I went, okay. So I taught French and choir at Daleville.
Wow.
I
Okay.
know. A
And
potpourri of jobs.
it sounds like it, and so many people they look at people like you in the height of your career and go, oh, wait, just super situation, and they don't realize that leading up to that, you know, you did what needed to be done, and it wasn't
Right.
exactly your major, but you made it work. And so now, how many years was Ski at Daleville before you went to
Um,
Huffman?
I think he was there five, maybe,
Okay.
or
Uh-huh.
four or five.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, and then of course after he left, good people wanting to come in. Yeah, that has been a band program that has continued
It
to have
has.
a lot of
It has
success.
lasted the test of time, and I'm so
Mhm.
proud of that.
Absolutely. So there was some good foundation laid.
Yeah.
So on to Huffman, bigger school, much bigger school, more opportunities.
Right.
And so Ski goes, you go, and of course you've talked to us about the substitute teaching, kind of getting your foot in the door. Have a little marching band
Yep.
there and then so how did you wind up then with that permanent job at LM Smith?
At Smith. Well, since I did do the substituting, I was offered to take over a job that was open, and it was going to three different schools. Most middle school band teachers in the Birmingham city system had two or three schools they had to travel to.
Mhm.
And my three schools were Smith, Riley, no, Smith, Inglenook, and Riley. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I had those three schools that I was supposed to go to. And when I started teaching there, every little school band the children played school instruments, and none of them on their own instruments. So they would play the school instrument, then another class came in and they would pick up the same instrument and play on. Oh, this is not going to work. So Smith ended up being something that I could build because John Tarrant was my principal, and he was a huge music fan. In fact, he had played in an orchestra, and so he was so set on making Smith a full-time position. So we built the program. I got kids to parents to start renting instruments for their children, and it was I think there were 12 in the band when I got to Smith. And by the end of my second year there were 40. And so Mr.
Okay.
Tarrant said, okay, that's
coming.
enough. We
Yeah.
need her full time. We've got 40 kids in band. And I thought that was a lot, but it was not. And then Inglenook and Riley, they still kept the same little 10 to 12 because in those neighborhoods, nobody could really afford to buy the instruments. And since John Tarrant was so adamant and so strong, he did get me there full time. And so I built Smith to 200, well, to half the school population by the time I left. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
Definitely, definitely. And I think, and that was when I came to Birmingham and got to know you. I think it was right about the time that Smith was really hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. But you didn't spend your whole career there. So tell us about where do we go from there?
Okay. Where we went from there, I got a call from a band director whose name I will not mention, but he called me at Smith one day and asked me if I would consider coming to work at one of his middle schools. And I said, well, does that include having to work with the high school band and make children march? He said, yes. I said, no, thank you, though. I appreciate it very much. And I'll tell you later who that was. And so then I got a call from either the principal or superintendent in Midfield asking me to come interview for a job. And I said, well, Ski, I'm having so many great things going at Smith, but I'm going to go. I haven't interviewed in probably 9 years, 10 years. So I'm going to go interview for the job. Well, he offered me more than he was paying his head football coach. And so I went, I guess I'm going to take that job because we were getting no supplement. And Birmingham City band directors got no supplements, none. And so that was a nice pay raise for me.
Yeah. I guess a nice thing about a city system is when there's one middle school or there's one high school, we can really get behind it. When you're in a large system, well, if we do this for this school, we have to do the same thing for all the other middle schools. We have to do the same thing for all the other high schools. So yeah, been there, done that. So
yes, you have.
yeah. So Rutledge and even first year, I mean, you got through district, you did pretty well at state, even that first year. So turning things around. I remember you talking about getting kids to play around, sustain notes, just to those fundamentals that are so important.
Right.
Anything else in particular, as far as turning it around? What did you do in those early days? Because I think this is so important for band directors who are going into a new job.
Right.
How do you handle that?
Well, I had been teaching for at least 10 years when I went to Midfield. And I knew that those students were not where they needed to be fundamentally. And I had a good relationship with the music ed department at the University of Alabama. They sent me student teachers a lot. And I asked if there was a way that I could get some of their graduate students or their senior students to come and teach private lessons or sectionals for me at Midfield. And I got the superintendent to fund that for me because he was all about building the program too. And so we had several college students come out once a week and pull students and work with them individually or small sections. And that helped a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, it wasn't too long, another couple of years in Superior at state contest.
Right. Taking two bands to two bands, the district and
Yeah.
state. And another thing was huge fundamental work, breathing exercises,
Hmm.
um, making sure that we knew what articulations we were supposed to use. And that's something that, I don't know, young band directors come out of school not knowing how to do these things. And maybe they do now, but I don't know, Frank. I mean, it's very important.
It is.
Do I use
Yes. Yes.
T top? How do I use, what do I use on that staccato? Well, just make it sound short. No, it's not supposed to sound short. It's supposed to be light and detached and bouncy. So anyway,
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
emphasizing what articulations to use and that we all use it the same way. Deep breathing, sustained long tones, all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell us about the next chapter. So
Next chapter,
we got midfield, really got it rocking and rolling, but
the next chapter, I got a call from an acquaintance who became a good friend and told me that he was leaving his situation and would I
really,
be interested in applying for the job? And it was
hmm,
Frank Buck. And
yeah,
I was
I
that
I
and that was
remember that conversation.
yep,
I was moving into administration,
yep,
hadn't been offered. I felt like, something was about to break and thought, who do I want to follow me? And there was a name at the top. And so
well,
I called to say, would you be the least bit interested in coming
yep.
to Pizitz? And you
And
said,
I went to my superintendent because he had supported me so much. And I said, I just wanted you to know that I'm going to interview for the Pizitz job. And I wanted you to know that because that's the only middle school job I have ever really aspired to have
yeah,
or to teach at. And I'm being offered the opportunity to interview. And he was disappointed, but he said, I understand. He said, it's Vestavia. I said, it is. And so I interviewed, and David Miles, whom I cherish, was very hesitant about hiring a woman. Very hesitant. And my superintendent at Midfield talked to him and he said, David, either you hire her or you don't. You've got to give me an answer because I'm not going to release her from her contract if you don't let me know something soon. So that
mhm.
was that. So,
Wow. Well, I did not know about that little reservation. Of course, he hired you, and then your successor was a woman whose successor was a woman. So,
yep.
but I told, after I talked to you, I told David, I said, this is who you need to hire. So, um, I guess he listened, but maybe didn't listen. But then, anyway,
Whatever.
he made the right decision, and I think he certainly
I think so
realizes
too
that
because I loved
now.
it.
Oh yes, oh yes. So tell me about the Pizitz years.
Well, the first year I was there, as you know, I had to go to the elementary school to teach first thing in the morning. And sometimes the kids would come, sometimes they wouldn't because they were missing PE. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, and
I
so
remember that
uh,
well.
that was hard. And
That
so at
that
the end of
that
the,
that was not what I wanted for that schedule, believe me.
oh, I know that. I know that. And I know whose it was, but we won't discuss that. But anyway, um, he said, what do you want to do about that? I said, I don't want to go to the elementary school anymore. He said, well, what are we going to do to recruit? I said, well, most of them don't come into band anyway, and they don't really learn much there because they don't come to class. He said, well, what do you propose we do? I said, well, why don't we, they had, what were those called? Unified arts classes?
Uh, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
Unified Arts,
yes. I said,
where they had
well,
6 weeks of this and 6 weeks of this.
right.
Yeah.
I said, I would like to teach band unified arts class. He said, what? I said, yes. If the board will give me funding for that, I will teach unified arts band. He said, can you do that? I said, yes, we can do that. And we did. And we did unified arts band for the sixth grade. And then we did unified arts, some kind of a thing for because I had to teach plenty of classes because we didn't have the numbers because those little elementary children. But after we started the Unified Arts Band, more students got interested. And when they went into seventh grade, more signed up for band. So I had like a seventh grade band
Uh-huh.
class until that got built. And then it ended up being an intermediate and an advanced band and two beginner classes. And so it went from there.
Absolutely. And to kind of fill people in, because I was very familiar with that schedule. When you
Yeah.
went into Pizitz as a sixth grader, you could have band all year, you could have choir all year, or you could have the unified arts where you got 6 weeks of this and 6 weeks of this. And at that time, the way it was presented was, we've got this, you can have six different things, or you can have band, you can have
Yeah.
choir. And so
Oh
it was
yeah.
like, and that was sort of the philosophy there. And so I think what she did there was a stroke of genius, that if all the kids are taking unified arts, offer band as the music portion, because music had always been a
Exactly.
part of it, but it was just kind of a general music. And so this was, you were now seeing all the kids
Yep.
and
And
getting them interested in band.
at the
Yeah.
end of that 6 weeks class, I had a mini concert. All the parents for that Unified Arts class were invited to come in and listen to their children. And I said, they've been doing this for 6 weeks. And so we had a little party, we had refreshments. The parents came in with their cameras and they were just like, they did that in 6 weeks. I said, yes. And just think what they can do in a year or 2 years.
Mhm.
So that kind of excited them a little bit.
Absolutely. That's great. And now for those who are middle school band directors, now I know a lot of places you've got eighth grade band,
Right.
seventh grade band,
Right.
sixth grade band. And the way the schedule's set up, they're locked into that. Tell us about the schedule at Pizitz. What allowed, because you could mix any grades.
Yeah.
You
Um,
remember what it was that made that work?
well, I'm trying to remember. What I do want to tell you guys, this is a little side subject. I volunteered at Pizitz to be on every committee there was to be on.
Which is good.
The
Yes.
scheduling committee, number one, because by the time we got to the point that I had two performing bands, we had a lot of kids in the program, and I wanted them by ability, not because you're seventh graders or not. And they say, oh, but that'll make the seventh graders feel bad. I said, no, they have one more year to grow, and they still get to do what the older kids do. And so I was on the scheduling committee and worked really, really hard to say, see, if we have these kids combine here, then, and we manipulated it that way. And I really don't know how we got it to work, except they worked really hard to help me get that done. And some
Yeah.
of the teachers, of course, said, everything's arranged around band. I said, well, it kind of is because we've got more in the program. It's just
Yeah.
the way it is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the thing, and it was actually this way when I went there, PE was offered every period for every grade level. So the period say that all the eighth grade teachers had planning, because they did. All the eighth grade teachers had planning period at one time. The seventh grade had period at one time. The sixth grade. And that's the thing in most middle schools that allowed you to not be able to mix grade, because when the eighth grade teachers are off, well, then the eighth graders all have to go somewhere.
You're right. You're exactly right.
And so at Pizitz, there were only two places for them to go. Their elective or PE. And since PE was offered every period for every grade level, if there was an eighth grader who was a beginner, then that period they had PE and they had beginning band another. And so that was the magic bullet. So for those teachers who were looking for how can I mix my grades, PE was it. And the person who was in charge of scheduling, Martha Chandler, the
Right.
girls' PE teacher. So she was the brains behind all of that made it all
Yeah.
work. And
Yes.
and that just made such a difference, because you didn't have to have perfect instrumentation every
Right.
year. You were
Right,
short
right.
clarinets this year, you just beef them up the next year?
And when I did beginning band, I know so many directors now want to have, a woodwind class and a brass class. I
Oh,
just said we have two beginning classes. Let's try to keep, the numbers the same.
yeah,
And I didn't care if it was mixed instrumentation. I could teach mixed instrumentation, so it
yeah,
was no problem. And that made it easier for them to schedule my students too, rather than saying, well, that's going to be really hard to schedule them for that class because they have this. And if I had two
exactly.
choices of where to put those beginners, that made it much easier for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, pretty soon, two bands going to district contest, um,
Mhm.
two bands going to state contest,
Yeah.
two bands getting superior ratings consistently at state
Yep.
contest. And that has continued. So the things, that you put in place, you grew the numbers enough to get an assistant.
Correct.
Tell us about that young man.
That young man is Jarrell Horton. And I don't know if he minds me telling you this, but he was offered a job in the county where I now live.
Okay.
And I called him and said, Jarrell, because Jarrell student taught with me.
Yes,
And
I
so I knew I
remember.
wanted him because his personality was beyond compare. The kids loved him. He was smart, he was funny, but he was so talented. And he would be a great recruiter too,
Yeah.
besides a great teacher. And so he said, really? I said, yes. I said, please hang in there. He said, well, I've just been offered this job. I said, I know you have, and I know you want to teach band. And but I really want you to come here. He said, I really do too, Ms. Winter. And so he finally held out and we were able to offer him that job. And he came and worked with me and it was awesome. It was so much fun. It
Mhm.
was so much fun to watch him teach.
And to grow
Oh
into
yeah,
that. And see, Jarrell was one of my younger sisters was his high school band director at West
exactly.
Lofton.
Lisa
And
Buck was his high school
yeah,
band director.
and Jarrell was the drum major, and then of course then he went to Samford, and so
Hmm.
from this little small town, and then winds up student teaching at Pizitz, um, and then he had to follow a pretty strong band director
Right,
because just Ski was at Huffman, you were at the middle school, which fed into his high school band. And
right.
then that worked so well, y'all did it again. You went
We
to
did it again.
Pizitz, and then of course Ski was at UAB,
Mhm.
and then went to Vestavia Hills High School. So again, now the two of you are working together with you.
Working together again. Yeah.
Yes. And so when Ski left, then of course Jarrell took the job, and you were able to recruit a pretty good new assistant. Tell us about her.
Now, are you talking about Kim or Heather?
Um, well, did I miss somebody in there? I
Well,
was thinking of Kim. So was there some?
Heather was there.
Oh,
Jarrell's
Heather
assistant.
Chesser.
Heather
Okay, who
Chesser
did that?
student
Heather
taught with
Palmer.
she student taught with me also. And
Okay.
we ended up having to have another person to start help at Liberty Park
Yeah.
and at Cahaba Heights. And
Mm-hmm.
so we hired Heather.
Okay.
And Heather and Jarrell were great friends from Sanford. And then when Ski retired, Jarrell took over at Vestavia. Heather was with him because she did part-time there. And so since Jarrell left me and I had no full-time person, I was able to pick the person that I wanted to succeed me, which was going to be soon. And it was Kim Bain.
Good choice.
I thought so too.
Very good choice. Yes, yes. Um, the
And
only
Kim student taught with me too. So
I didn't know that, but wasn't she in Ski's high school band? in
Yes.
in
Kim
Huffman.
Bain and Theo Vernon were both in Ski's
Hmm.
high school band.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these connections just, it's all over the place. How
I know.
things keep keep coming back together. And so, of course, Kim did okay. I understand she found herself in mid-December stuck in Chicago with 60 of her or 80 of her closest middle school friends at a little,
Exactly.
you know, little clinic that they call the Midwest. So the only junior high middle school band ever from the state of Alabama to go to the
Exactly.
Midwest was its middle school.
Exactly.
So wonderful. And they built you a new band room while you were at Pizitz.
They did.
All things considered, the one you had wasn't that bad. In fact, when I interviewed for that job, I drove up there to tell them thanks, but no thanks. I'm happy where I am until I walked into the band room and went, wow.
Really?
Oh, yeah. What was Susie? It had central air instead of the window units. It sounded like B-52 bombers, and it had an instrument room, and it had a library, and it had an office. And where I
And so,
was, it had those things, but it was all the same thing. It was kind of like a large walk-in closet with my desk at one end and the
oh
instruments
my
at the other
gosh.
end. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I thought it was the Taj Mahal. So I took the job on
Yeah.
the second floor. So getting four timpani up and down stairs every time you were doing an assembly program, that was interesting. But
Yeah. And if
they and
and if more than 30 kids were playing at one time, it was an 8-foot ceiling. So it was really not good.
no, 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 no. But they did it right when they built you a new one, band and
Yeah.
choir facility. And I think
Yes.
probably a lot of people came to visit as they were building their own, going,
Yeah.
let's see
Exactly.
what you have there. So a wonderful time at Pizitz. I mean, you did so many things. But you didn't lay down the baton when you retired from there. Tell us about some of the opportunities that have come along the way.
I've done honor bands and I've done clinics. And I do a lot of mentoring of young band directors, and I enjoy that very much. And what else do we do? I guess that's kind of it.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of
But
them
yeah,
too.
done a
Yeah,
lot of it.
in state and out of state.
Yes, in state and out of state. I've enjoyed. I think one of my favorite places that I've been was Louisiana when I was doing one of their state. I lost you. Are you there?
I am. I can see you and hear you both.
Okay.
So I think we're still good.
Was
And for those
Louisiana.
that are listening to us, there are storms brewing right now, both where Susie and I are. So I think we've been lucky to keep power throughout all of this.
But you can see me?
I can, yes.
Okay. But this is just a little side note that one of the places I judged in Louisiana, they took us out to eat. And well, I had never really eaten Cajun food. And they brought a bucket to the table and it had these bugs in it. And I looked at them and I looked at the all the directors there and they looked at me and they started laughing. I said, what is that? And they said, it's crawfish. I said, well, how do you eat it? And they told me, I said, I can't do that. I can't do that. So anyway, that was my experience with them. It was nasty.
Wow. Wow.
And
So
I got to judge with Pat Guerin. That was nice.
wonderful lady.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she's a star in her own right, that's for
Yes,
sure.
she is. Yes, she is. I remember those bands that she had up in North Carolina. So great. That is wonderful. Well, words of wisdom, especially words of wisdom for the female band directors, because and when you look at the Hall of Fame and you look at
Mm,
how many men there are and how many women there are, it's just um
hmm.
I'm trying to think how many other women. It's not many. It's not
It's
many
it's
aside from you.
she was at Foley.
Blanche Simmons.
Blanche. Blanche is
Oh,
the other one.
Yeah, who was, amazing, just a legend. And also,
Mm,
when you look at those who were middle school or junior high band directors,
yeah.
there were some who were, junior high, then they were high school band directors. But those who made young bands their career, Dee Dee Black, of course, Dee Dee then went to the State Department. And so a lot
Oh,
of
yes, he did. Yeah. And I didn't realize he was a junior high band director.
he was in Montgomery, Alabama. He had
Hmm.
and had he taught at two schools at the same time. And so his Bellingrath junior high bands that fed Sidney Lanier back in the day when Sidney Lanier was so fine. Uh, but yeah, so and I think you're the only other junior high, middle school band director who's a member of the Hall of Fame. So
Yeah.
words of
I feel
wisdom that you have for those that are going, I want to be her. So if they wanted to be Susie Winter, what do they need to be doing now?
when you get your job, know what you want to do with it. Do you want it to be just a competitive situation, or do you want it to be music learning for life? Not for the students to become a teacher, but for them to appreciate and love music their life, and they'll support it forever. When you do recruit, do it positively, and when you teach, do it with positiveness. It's almost like a dog and pony show, but with restraints. You've got to make kids have fun in band, but you've got to have them controlled. And that sounds like it's not something easy to do, but if you practice it and if you're consistent with it, it can happen absolutely. Um, if you are going to have students in band, offer them something that they're going to love. You can't always choose the music that's going to be best for them. You're going to have to choose music that they will enjoy. So you're going to have to spend some time studying music, listening to a lot of music to find something that they will love, but also they're going to learn from. I spent, gosh, during the summers, we used to get the J.W. Pepper mail outs. Remember those, Frank? With the
Oh,
music.
how I do. Yeah.
And I would order the sets and I would
And the
listen
little
and
square
ugh,
records that you put on the
yep,
record player.
exactly.
Yeah.
And listened for hours, took notes and marked them.
Mhm.
And I spent so much time finding music that they would enjoy, but would also be a great teaching tool. And I think that's really important that so many people don't do that. They just say, well, this will be good for them. It's going to do this, this, and this. Are they going to enjoy it? Are they going to like it? Especially in middle school. I
Huh?
mean, in your spring concert, don't make that something that's like, I'm going to play the hardest stuff I can. Make the spring concert a relaxing, fun environment for them. Um, when you do go for a job, do what I said, volunteer for committees. If you have to spend extra time after school, you're going to have to do that. If you have a family, which Ski and I didn't, we both were band directors, but if you have a family, you're going to have to learn to do your time, spend time at the band room rather than just leave at 3:30. Um, let your principal know how much you appreciate him, support your principal. Just this faculty needs to know that you appreciate them. Another thing that I used to do was visit teachers' classrooms at visits on a planning period. I would go by and say, "Hey, Nancy, can I just sit in your math class for a little bit? I want to see what you do." And I went to the science classes and did the same thing. And so just create a great relationship with your faculty, because it's easy for band directors to get resentment because of how much, not power, but there's so much support given to bands through the community that sometimes teachers feel left out or they feel ignored. And so you need to make sure that you know your faculty knows that you support them too. What else, Frank? What else?
That sounds, yeah. There's a college class right there.
Yeah.
I think,
And I've got
just
some
as you
notes I
have
want
to,
to talk to you. Some notes I want to talk to you about later that I'm putting together.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Susie, this has been a pleasure. Like I say, we've known each other for, I don't even know how many years now, but I learned things during this interview that I didn't know. And, it's just been a whole lot of fun. And I know that
It has
many
been fun.
people are going to get a lot out of this. So, this has been an interview with Suzanne Winter, member of the Phi Beta Mu Hall of Fame.